Okay, so have you ever found yourself wondering, like, what if things went too far?
Right. Like you're in a situation and it's getting heated and you think, whoa, where's the line? We're going to dive deep into that today. We're talking legal defenses,
Hmm.
specifically for those intentional torts, where you're intentionally
Yeah.
doing something.
Yeah.
And to understand, not to become lawyers
Of
ourselves,
course not.
but just so we kind of know the lay of the land, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
we've got some wild cases to dig into, by the way. We're talking
Oh, I love a good case.
football coaches. We've got booby traps.
Oof.
It's going to be a ride.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
So first up, consent. Sounds straightforward, right? If someone's okay with something,
Yeah.
then legally speaking, there's no issue.
Well, in theory, yes, consent is absolutely crucial, especially when we're talking about potential torts, right? But it gets complicated. Legally, consent has to be freely given. There can't be any pressure, any coercion, any sense that someone didn't have a choice. Otherwise, that defense just evaporates.
So, like, signing a waiver, that's the clearest example, right? You go to a haunted house, sign the thing, you know you might get spooked.
Right.
That's express consent.
Exactly. You said it. Express consent. Crystal clear. No ambiguity, ideally written down somewhere so everyone's on the same page. But then we have implied consent. And that's where,
Ooh, things get messy.
things get very interesting. It's all about the context. Like, imagine you join a basketball team.
Okay.
You step onto that court, you're implicitly consenting to a certain amount of physical contact.
Right, you're not going to sue someone for, like,
Yeah.
blocking a shot.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
But that makes me think of Kaufman v. Garnett. This football coach, a little too gung-ho, tackles a player during practice. Yeah, the kid ends up with a broken arm. You'd think, okay, it's football, right? But the court actually disagreed.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of how consent can be tricky, even when you think it's obvious. The player, by being on that team, consented to the normal risks of football. But the court found that the coach's actions went way too far. It was beyond what's considered acceptable, even in a contact sport known for being rough. So it's a good reminder, even when we think we're operating within the bounds of consent, what we think and what the law says aren't always the same thing.
So it's not a free-for-all, even if everyone thinks they're on the same page. Okay, but what about, like, everyday stuff? Going to the doctor. That's implied consent, right?
Yeah.
Go for a checkup, they're going to examine you.
Most of the time, yes. Going to the doctor implies you agree to a reasonable level of examination, treatment, that sort of thing. But, and this is important, there are exceptions. Emergencies, for instance. If someone's unconscious, they can't exactly consent, right? Doctors can step in, act in the patient's best interest. And minors, of course, parental consent comes into play there.
Makes sense. Consent. Trickier than it seems. But let's shift gears a little bit because I'm fascinated by this one. Self-defense. We believe we're in danger. We have a right to protect ourselves. But how far is too far? Where's the line?
Okay, so self-defense, it's a fundamental right, absolutely. We all have the right to protect ourselves from harm. However, and this is a big however, using self-defense as a legal defense, you have to meet certain very specific conditions.
It's not just, I felt scared, right?
Right. Number one, you have to have a reasonable belief that harm is imminent. We're not talking about what-if scenarios or feeling a little uneasy. The danger has to be immediate, it has to be credible, and your fear has to be justified based on the situation.
So no, like, preemptive strike on someone who looked at you funny, right?
Probably not the best idea. And even if you are facing a real threat, the force you use has to be proportionate to that threat.
Okay, so you can't bring a gun to a fistfight, basically.
Exactly. The court's going to look at everything very closely. What happened, what you did, and whether your response was reasonable under those specific circumstances.
This is making me think about Heisler v. De Loretto. Guy punches another guy, claims self-defense, and the court actually sides with the puncher.
Yeah, and that one always raises eyebrows.
Oh.
But it all comes down to the specifics. In that case, the court looked at the evidence and determined that the defendant's fear was reasonable. So his actions, while extreme, were justified given what he perceived as an immediate threat.
Wow. Okay, so punching someone in the face, sometimes justifiable, wild. But what about protecting property? Let's say someone's breaking into my house.
Right.
Can I, like, go full Home Alone on them? Tripwires, paint cans.
The classic Home Alone scenario. It makes for a fun movie, but in real life, it's a legal minefield.
Right.
Let's talk about Kako v. Briney. Couples worried about people trespassing on their property, so they set up a spring gun trap in their farmhouse.
Oh, no.
It's a trap designed to seriously injure anyone who trips it. Trespasser gets hurt, and this case went all the way to court.
I'm guessing the court didn't side with the homeowners.
Nope. The court's decision was crystal clear. You cannot use deadly force to protect property. Human life is more important than possessions, period. If you're going to use that level of force, the threat has to be against a person, not your stuff.
Wow. It's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to protect your home, your belongings.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, someone's safety
Always comes first.
comes first. So much to think about. Consent, self-defense, these defenses, they're not get-out-of-jail-free cards. It's about context. It's about those fine lines.
Exactly. It always comes back to reasonableness. Was your belief that you were in danger actually reasonable, given what was happening?
Yeah.
And was the way you responded proportionate to that danger? Those are the questions the court's going to ask.
It really makes you think, right? Like, what would you do if you were in one of these situations? Would you know where that line is? So much to consider. Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and maybe, just maybe, avoid setting up any booby traps.